Hello and welcome to Podforce One. I'm Miranda Devine. Today I'm in the West Wing speaking with one of the most powerful people who you might not have heard of, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Thank you so much, Susie Wiles, for having us in your office. I know that you're not a big fan of doing interviews, especially long-form interviews, so I really appreciate that you've come to Podforce One to talk to us a little bit about your job and what makes you tick. And particularly, I wanted to ask you about these last couple of weeks have been momentous in terms of achievements in any president's term. What to you has stood out?
Really, soon will be 6 months here. And looking at the accomplishments in totality, it's unfathomable. And the last 2 weeks have been even more so, between foreign leaders and peace and increased defense spending and a very strategic action on Iran, and soon to be, we hope, peace in Gaza, passing the One Big Beautiful Bill. I mean, the list is too long for even your long-form podcast, but it's just been remarkable.
And is that something that surprised you, that you were able, with President Trump, to achieve so much so quickly?
No, because the way the 2020 election went and did whatever, he had 4 years to think about exactly what he wanted to do when he got back here, and was ready to begin on the first day and has never stopped since. As you probably know as well as anybody, he never stops working. And so when you combine a work ethic that's unparalleled with a wish list that's very long and an appetite for success for the American people, this is what you get.
Yeah, hit the ground running. And but I guess we see that Donald Trump works in Trump speed, warp speed. But that also means that the people who work for him do the same. Do you ever find it hard keeping up?
I don't know of another mortal who could really keep up.
Right.
I work as hard as I can, and I think I do fine, or at least if I don't, he hasn't told me that yet. But it is superhuman pace. There's no question. And if you look around at the staff, they're all young but me. So there's a reason for that.
Yeah. And what actually does a chief of staff do?
Oh boy. I gave a piece of advice to myself when I started this job. I am the chief of staff. I'm not the chief of Donald Trump. And if I keep remembering that, then I know to facilitate what he needs and wants to be the president of the United States, leader of the free world. We assemble, I think, the best staff that's ever worked in a White House, bar none. I am in charge of all the administrative stuff that nobody would want to be in charge of, and also the big picture that I do want to be in charge of. And it's a jack of all trades in some ways. In government, and particularly in the White House, the chief of staff is fairly prescribed. There is a responsibility for the military office, responsibility for the continuity of government, all that sort of thing that I didn't know I would be handling when I got here. Because it is different than the campaign in that regard. But I have a long background in local and state government, and so it's not a complete shock. But the protocol that's associated with the West Wing is beyond anything I really expected.
And what do you mean by that? What do you mean protocol? You mean rules?
Rules. I mean, it's protocol, not law.
Yeah.
But things have been done a certain way here for a very long time. And you can do some things differently, and I do, but you can't upset the whole apple cart at once. And also, these protocols are here for a reason. It does make the machine work more easily. Yeah. And people already understand how things are supposed to be. So in many ways, it's good. In fact, in virtually all ways, it's good, but it was something for me to get used to.
Yeah. And you said you involved in the big picture. What does that mean? I mean, are you, I heard that you helped negotiate the release of some hostages at one point. You had dinner with the president of ABC News a few days before that George Stephanopoulos settlement happened. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
I didn't negotiate any hostages release. I'm a cheerleader for it.
Yes.
But that's a Steve Witkoff.
Right.
That's a Steve Witkoff amazing achievement.
Yeah.
I do get to do really amazing things and meet people that I would not meet in any other walk of life. And I hope to, when I do that, I hope to bring the sensibilities of this administration, why he ran, what he's doing, and how quickly to every executive, or in this case, the head of a network that I meet. It's our job to broaden as best we can his message and his views everywhere we can do it. And oftentimes that, in my case, includes political people, but it also includes CEOs and that sort of thing. So it's a real joy to be able to do that.
And what about your relationship with Donald Trump? Tell us about the first time you met him. I think it was 2015 in Trump Tower in New York.
A mutual friend arranged a meeting because I looked around at the field of then 17 Republican primary candidates and said, I'd been a traditional Republican all my life. And I thought, this is just not working, not for the American people. We need a disruptor here. We need somebody that thinks about how to serve the American people differently. And I looked at the disruptors, and he was the one that I had the most interest in.
Wow.
My dad had a passing friendship with him, so I heard about him a bit. And of course, you can't be raised in the New York area and not know who Donald Trump is.
Yeah.
And we had a great meeting, and he wanted to pick my brain about Florida politics. We shook hands, and he said, "Thank you very much." And I left, and I didn't hear anything for quite a bit. And then when he got ready to announce his leadership team in Florida, he called and said, "Will you be a part of this?" And so that was I was the co-chairman of the state, not working then, but as time went on, Florida needed a little bit of a boost. And so then I went from sitting in the VIP section at the rallies to knocking on doors.
Oh, wow.
and we did well. We did very well.
Yes, you did. That's amazing. So you actually perceived MAGA before most Americans did, and certainly most Republicans did. You perceived that Donald Trump had what he is now to be this transformational president.
I did. I didn't know MAGA as what we know. I just knew that what we'd been doing for all these many years was not working for the country, and certainly not for middle America. And after talking to this billionaire, who I didn't really go into the meeting thinking would have his finger on the vein of the middle class, I realized he did. And then that decision was easy after that.
Huh. Because you had worked for Ronald Reagan previously and Jack Kemp, but you actually worked in the White House when you were a young woman. So you'd seen a lot of Republican politics.
I had. I took a little bit more than a decade off of it. And then when my children were little, I stayed home because I couldn't go jetting off to Washington when we lived in Ponte Vedra, Florida. And then when they were grown, and out of the house, it was kind of 2015 and even before that. And so I thought it was time to leave home. So I did it all in reverse. Most people start at the local level and then they move to the state level. And then if they're fortunate, they get a job at the federal level. I did it in reverse.
Right.
And now I'm back.
I just wanted to pick up on what you said about staying at home with the children, because I think that's something that's very important, especially to young women when they look at successful women who've had an amazing career, that you've also been a mother, now a grandmother. I know your girls speak very highly of your motherly skills, but you did sort of ratchet down your career for a period.
I did.
But that wasn't the end.
I don't recommend it.
Oh, really?
Because re-entry is hard.
Right.
I had a really specific skill, so it wasn't as difficult for me as it would have been maybe for others. But I did take 11 years pretty much out of this business. And so getting back into it, I didn't know whether I could or whether this career had passed me by. And it hadn't, but it's not the easiest thing to do.
No, I did this too, though.
Did you?
I feel it's a good template for young women.
Good.
Have their children young and then come back into their careers and blossom.
And when they're older, teenagers into it, mine are well adults.
Yeah.
They have a different perspective of what mom does and, why mom does it. And in and hopefully they're proud of us.
Yes.
Which they wouldn't have had as a 5-year-old.
No.
So it's very different to do what we did.
Yeah.
But looks like it's worked for both of us.
Yes, that's right. And do you feel that, you've got a lot of young women who work for you, who are young parents, got children. Do you make accommodations for that?
You can't be your best at work if you're worried about your children, worried about your daycare, worried about whether the nanny's sick on a given day. So I live that. I understand that. And I want these women involved.
Yeah.
So hopefully we make it as comfortable as the White House can be for young moms, young parents, young dads too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Carolyn Levitt comes to mind.
Perfect
She's
example.
amazing. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I know that people have said, Joy Behar, for instance, has said, oh, Donald Trump, he can't stand strong women. And, what do you say to that, considering your role?
I never tweet. I have virtually no social media, but that called me. It was actually Mark Cuban that said it.
Oh, right.
And I said, wait. Linda McMahon, Brooke Rollins, I forget all the strong women around Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Starting with Melania Trump
yes.
and Ivanka Trump.
Yeah.
It's an urban myth that could not be more wrong.
Why do you think people get Donald Trump so wrong? I mean, you work with him. I'm sure you wouldn't do that if you didn't respect him and like him. So why is he so misunderstood?
Change is hard for people. A disruptor is hard for people. We expect things to go a certain way, certain decorum, certain sort of way to be. We have a view of our president that was rooted maybe in the 50s and 60s. And Donald Trump's gift, in my view, is the thing that makes people uncomfortable sometimes, which is that he says what so many people think, but never had the nerve to say it. And that is how he reaches Americans, well, the world, but certainly Americans. And yet it's different than the prescribed protocol of how a president should talk. He just says what's on his mind, and people say, yeah, I think that too. So it's different, but it's working. He's in his second term. And as we started this interview, he has done more in 6 months than many administrations, certainly the last one, did in 4 years.
Yeah. And he calls you the Ice Maiden. He's also said you're rough and tough. That's not.
What do you think? I don't think so.
It's not the image that you project, but I don't think you could do this job and get to where you are without having a bit of true grit.
I do. But it's not my preferred way to be. If you cannot get what you want with respect and logic, then sometimes you have to be a little tougher. I don't have to do that very much here. Mm-hmm. Everyone here is so devoted to what we're trying to do. I don't have to be tough very much, which is sort of a gift to me.
Right. Yeah. When was the last time you had to be tough?
This morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What happened?
But not very often. The cabinet they each have what in other places would be a government or a company or whatever to manage.
Yeah.
And this cabinet is unparalleled in its diversity, in its strength, in its understanding of its issues, person by person. And that breeds some independence sometimes that you have to pull back on.
Oh, that's good. So you sort of do that so that Donald Trump doesn't have to do it.
Right.
And so that everything seems smooth to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had 4 chiefs of staff in his first term. Does that ever give you pause, or do you just think they were the wrong people?
I don't know. I wasn't here, so
Yeah.
I don't really think too much about the first term.
Mm.
I've been here since February of 2021. So I've seen this evolution and tried to adapt here to meet who he is now.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened before. I know they came here with very little Washington experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some cases, very little understanding of Donald Trump, the man.
Mm.
We work on that very hard here to make sure what we do can adapt to the way he wants to do it.
Right.
And so far, so good.
As in everything has to be done quickly and
quickly, thoroughly.
Right.
And by quickly, I mean before you leave the office.
Right.
And thoroughly, and with a light touch whenever possible,
Yeah.
despite what might be said out there. He's a kind, understanding, warm person, and he does not prefer to be as strong as he sometimes is forced to be. So that expectation goes to us too. If we can get it done immediately and nicely, that's always going to be the preferred route.
Right. And as a boss, what's he like? You must spend hours with him every day.
And people ask me, what's it like? What's hard about your job? Here's what's not hard about my job: Donald Trump.
Right.
He is predictable and open and approachable and honest and honorable and committed and all of those things, which does not mean he can't be irritated or frustrated. But I view my job as trying to keep as much of that away from him so that he can think clearly about the big picture. We'll take care of the back office, if you will.
Interesting. What a great way to be. And what's been like, how do you handle him when he is irritated or angry?
Well, I've never found him to be irritated or angry for no reason.
Right.
So solving the underlying problem is where I focus. He'll be angry. He'll say so. But again, at the end of the day, what he wants from me is to fix whatever made him angry. So I try to go to the root cause and do it that way.
Yeah, good idea. And does he have any annoying habits?
He's known to be tardy.
Oh, really?
And so the day gets out of control pretty quickly. But no, he is what you see is what you get. And that's a blessing for a staff member, because then I don't wonder when I come in on Monday, what's it going to be like? I know what it's going to be like. It's going to be breakneck speed to get as much done as fast as possible for the people that need it and matter. And that's really what we do here every day, all day, 7 days a week, by the way.
Right. Yes. And so you're sort of creating order out of what a natural chaos.
There is a natural chaos, and he prefers it. He prefers as many inputs on any given topic as he can possibly get. And I prefer that for him. It makes for better decisions. But at a certain point, you've got to rein it all in, and he's got to make a decision, and he does. And then we execute.
And he seems very tidy. His desk is always tidy. He seems to like order.
Very tidy. He's a collector of paper. But we have a great system to make sure we comply with all the records requirements here. But he reads, a voracious reader. Reputation is different, but I can tell you, a voracious reader. How many times have you gotten notes from him, Miranda, when he read something?
100%. He reads the New York Post cover to
Yes,
cover.
he does. And the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times
Right.
and sometimes the Washington Post. And anything else that comes his way, Financial Times and all of the periodicals. So if you read the day's newspaper, the day's news, you can almost predict what the day is going to bring. And that is on top of whatever was supposed to be going on that day too. So I feel like I play catch up all day, every day. But the progress that he's making is so enormous. I mean, it's worth it. It is worth whatever we have to do to get him to a place where he can achieve what he's achieved in 6 short months.
And I guess his being on top of what's current in the news means that he's more adaptable with whatever policies he has or how he messages them.
Yeah, and he's always been sort of a TV guy, but now he's truthing and tweeting and being on podcasts like yours.
Yeah.
He's a very adaptable communicator. And in these times, you don't just, with all due respect to CBS, you don't turn on CBS and watch Walter Cronkite and you're done.
Yeah.
It is all day, every day, in every mode that's available. And frankly, that was a big key of success in the campaign. He spoke in every way somebody could receive his message. And it's still like that now.
And you were there, I mean, in his really dark days.
I was.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously he must appreciate the loyalty because a lot of people didn't stick with him then. Why did you do that?
I believe fundamentally, thoroughly, completely in what he believes.
Mm-hmm.
And I believed he could and would come back. I believed he would overcome everything that was thrown at him, which was everything.
Yeah.
And then when we got to an actual formal campaign, all the campaign activities, we had a great team. I had great partners, but it's pretty prescriptive. You know, you figure out what your policy is. You talk about them everywhere you can. In his case, you have rallies of tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of
in
people.
between courtroom appearances.
That was a bad couple of months.
Yeah.
But he managed.
Yeah.
He
Did you ever
managed
see
through
him down?
Never. In the dark days when truly they were persecuting him, he put a suit on and a tie on and came to the office and worked all day, every day.
Right. And now during this period, you had worked for Ron DeSantis, and then there was quite a nasty falling out, which I only realized recently they were very nasty to you and tried to really destroy your career. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. But it's in my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And I think he's governing Florida, which is my home state. He's a good governor. And whatever personal differences he had or whatever deficiencies he thought I had are long past my thinking about them.
And what went wrong with his campaign? I mean, he seemed to start off with so much promise, and then Donald Trump pretty much demolished him.
Correct.
Pretty comprehensively.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So what was wrong, apart from having lost you?
No, it had nothing to do with me. It was the president's time, and he did the things that a candidate has to do to get through those early primary states, the first four in particular. The president had done it before. He knew what was involved. We had an organization and apparatus that supported him. And frankly, there was never any question that it was going to end up like it did.
Mm. And you managed to get Florida. I mean, I think he got triple the Florida vote. He managed to turn Florida into a Republican state from it was a blue state. Mm-hmm. What's the secret?
So it's the influx. You were benefited by the influx of people moving to Florida. So there's more to work with.
Right. All those New Yorkers. People from New Jersey and California that came to Florida came because they weren't happy with where they came from in so many cases. So it's pretty easy when you come from a blue state that's failing you to say, well, you should think about this thing becoming a Republican. And in Donald Trump's Republican world, the sell was incredibly easy. Mm-hmm. In fairness, he had 3 campaigns there to register voters, and also Ron DeSantis, and most importantly, Rick Scott. Right. In his 8 years of being governor, really made a difference. These individuals prioritized voter registration, and then if you register them, they're the most likely to vote. And you know who they are because you registered them. So getting out the vote is a little bit easier. So it all kind of worked synergistically in Florida. And now it's red, for sure. Yeah. Now, let's go back to your childhood. Your dad, Pat Summerall, was a legendary sportscaster, also a talented athlete. He'd also had a very difficult childhood, I think, and which then later came back in the form of alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your growing up, under the shadow, I guess, of this amazing father that everybody loved, and how what an impact that had on you. I know you were very sporty as well.
I was, back in the day. I grew up in the 60s when, in most families, the daughters, the girls, didn't have all the same opportunities that the boys had, and in my family, we did. He would never have thought of giving my brothers an opportunity that he didn't give me. And that, I didn't realize at the time that was unusual. But I look back at it now and realize I don't think I would have been able to do the things I've been able to do, really gender blind. Because that's how I was raised. And my mother was the same. So I grew up in a household where everybody was equal, and it was a merit-based household.
Right.
100%. And that's just kind of who I am because of it.
And you were the oldest with 2 younger brothers.
Right.
So did that make you a bit of a tomboy? What was your attitude?
Not so much.
Yeah.
I did the whole home ec thing and
Right.
all that. But everybody in the family was very athletic and punishingly so. Which,
How?
In Florida, when you could always get a tennis court at noon because what fool would play? But we did. and we all played every sport and did everything. And when my brothers misbehaved, my mother would send them out to run it off.
Right.
And we just sort of grew up that way. We grew up competitively, but it was a healthy competition. And because you earned what you got in our family, we all earned it. And it was an unusual thing. Maybe it's unusual now. It was certainly unusual in the 60s.
Tell me what your memories were of your father growing up.
He made it a point to take us to work. So I've spent lots of time in the broadcast booth at various golf and lots of tennis and some football over the years. Again, I don't think there were lots of daughters in those boxes back then. And, we knew he was successful and he grew in success and stature over the years. And we watched it happen. And I think I was afforded opportunities that others would not have been. So my memories of my dad are of a driven, smart, kind person.
He did, I think, a master's in Russian history, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
That's surprising.
Perennial learner. Back in the day, now everything is, online. You can anything you want to know about any athlete or what number they're wearing on any given day, or when they catch a pass, you have to know who it is and who they are. You had to learn that back in the day. Now you just look at your phone. Yeah. But he studied very hard. He worked very, very hard, and ushered in sort of the modern broadcast booth environment in his 25 years with John Madden.
Yeah. I mean, he was just the voice of sport. It wasn't just NFL. It was golf and tennis.
Tennis, football, a little bit of ABA when I was young.
Right.
Basketball.
Yeah.
Pan Am Games. So, the quasi-Olympic things. And, he was limited by the network he worked for. If the network, whether it was CBS or Fox, had a particular contract for a sporting event, he would work it. He didn't work the Olympics because that was always back in those days, it was always an NBC presentation. But there was no sport he wouldn't volunteer to work.
And he always had a good time. He always seemed to be funny and just humorous. And
too good sometimes.
Right, yes. Well, which brings me to the sad alcoholism which he got over. But that was because of you in part, wasn't it? You had to write him a letter.
Well, if you become sober and you live another 30 years sober, it's not sad.
No. It's a great triumph.
And it's conquering something that many can't, unfortunately. Yes. But yes, when my mom decided that he needed professional treatment, the part of the prescription was for each of the children to write a letter, which he didn't read until he got into, in his case, the Betty Ford Clinic. And so he says, I don't know, he says it was meaningful enough to really make him think.
And what did you say in the letter?
I talked about, I had one of my daughters was a toddler, and how he in a state wouldn't recognize her or see her when she would be running around, and that was horrifying to me because he'd been such a good dad when I was a little girl. I talked about my own health scare that he'd never sort of asked about, because you don't. It's a disease that clouds your judgment. And then
alcoholism.
Yes, alcoholism or addiction generally.
Addiction, yeah.
And then I said that sometimes I didn't really want to share the same name because he was doing so much that I didn't respect. I don't remember the precise words, but that's kind of what I said to him, and it got his attention apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you got your dad back after
we
that.
did.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah. And it takes an enormous amount of willpower to get over that. So hats off to him.
He's very unusual. Typically, the smarter you are, the more you think you can outthink addiction.
Yeah.
You can't.
No.
It's a disease, and you have to just get to the point where you resolve never to partake again. And when he left treatment, he never had a relapse. He never had even a temptation. We would go to their house and there'd be beer or wine in the refrigerator, and he just didn't. There was no temptation there. When he beat it, he beat it.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Donald Trump has got such a will to succeed? I mean, he's got so much money. He doesn't have to do this, as you say. And he wasn't born poor. He didn't have anything to escape from.
He cares so. He is truly a patriot and cares so deeply about this country. And that's not something that he came to in 2016. It's always been there. I didn't know his dad or his early life, but I have to believe that it comes from there. And this country's given him everything, and he believes this is his chance to begin to give back. And I think he's right.
Yeah. And he's had a few, this has been a pretty smooth presidency, but one little hiccup was Elon.
Yeah. Little hiccup?
Little hiccup, yeah. I saw Elon Musk here, very comfortable coming in and out of the Oval Office, had sleepovers in the Lincoln bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed almost as if he had a sort of fatherly fixation with Donald Trump that I guess inevitably was going to blow up at some point. How did you see that relationship?
Similar.
Yeah.
The president was very, very kind to him. And Elon had so much to offer us. He knew things we didn't know. He knew people and technologies that we didn't know. It was a great thing when it was a great thing. And I had a very troublesome ending.
Why do you think that happened?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't know. I know that what has been said doesn't ring accurate to me, but I don't know. I enjoyed working with Elon. I think he's a fascinating person and sees the world differently. And I think that's probably what the president saw too, just a little bit different than the average Joe. But certainly came to not a good ending.
Yeah, the president seemed to be very interested in him. I mean, he would spend a long time, at dinners and things, talking to him closely. Obviously, there was something there, but...
Well, he's the world's richest man, might be the world's smartest man, honestly.
Yeah.
And he does have a quirky, approach to the way he views virtually everything, but certainly business and organizations and government, and insight into people that were really important, I think, in the very early days, particularly during transition.
And do you think he got, jealous because he wasn't getting Donald Trump's full attention, or was it something else?
No, that doesn't sound like Elon. I don't know. I don't know.
And apart from that, the rest of the cabinet seemed to be working together like a well-oiled machine. Scott Bessent, I guess, has been a rock star. Who are some of the others that you get on well with? It's not too hard.
Yeah, they're all great.
Yeah.
But I was sitting in a cabinet meeting one day, and they do tend to go on a while. And so I was jotting down in my notebook how I saw the cabinet. And these numbers are wrong, but order of magnitude correct. 5 published authors, 7 billionaires, 11 lawyers, a couple of minorities, a Democrat or two. It is an amazing group of people that he put together. And what Bobby Kennedy's done, President took some criticism, not so much for Bobby, but what has he run before? And he has recruited a team that's unparalleled. He's doing great. Brooke Rollins is doing great. Linda McMahon has an impossible job that she's done with great grace.
Yes. And achieved a lot, actually.
Marco Rubio was born for this.
Yes.
And has just been quickly assimilated over here in his NSC position. It really, there's not one who I would say is not a complete success in what they're doing in their area.
And they're young and energetic too.
They are. Even the ones that are not young are still energetic.
Yeah. And just lastly, last couple of questions, but I wanted to ask you about any view you had about Joe Biden and the way his office was run. I think he had 2 chiefs of staff, but it was a very low energy presidency.
He was a low energy president, and I think that's actually harder on the staff than what I have. They were pushing, I'm pulling. They could not have been more kind to me as we were transitioning. Really wonderful at telling us what to expect, what resources were at our fingertips. They were terrific. The presidency, not so much, but the individuals that I worked with and I knew were spectacular. And I actually call on them from time to time now.
That's really nice to hear that they were so generous and bipartisan. Yeah. It's not what you think.
No. Not what I expected, but it was welcome.
And did you get any clues about what Joe Biden was doing during the day?
I didn't. We had one meeting right after the election. The president and I came, and President Biden and his chief, Jeff Zients, had a sit down in the Oval. And it was a great meeting. And I kept thinking, these two have been just saying horrific things about each other, and they're like old golfing buddies here now.
Really?
It was very pleasant and very professional. And Jeff, I just thank him for all he did to get me ready for this. But I don't know. I don't have any insight into the presidency per se. It's kind of hard for me to believe. The whole thing is hard for me. Sitting here now looking at that, I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. To hide it is amazing.
To hide it.
Yeah. It's probably because he had good moments when
he did. And he had good people.
Right.
Maybe we're not philosophically aligned, but I think they're good people.
And now we're coming up to a year since the Butler attempted assassination. I mean, I guess you don't really like to think about it too much, but it was so close that he could have died and history would have been changed just a millimeter. Do you ever look back at that and think that it was divine intervention?
100%. And I think in a candid moment, he would say so. The way the rally itself unfolded, the chart he had them put up on the screens, on the big LED boards, it was always the last chart in the rotation. And it was always on the other side. So to have him ask for that chart 8 minutes in and to have it come on the side that is opposite caused him, it's this way, caused him look in a different direction and lift his head just a little because it was higher. And that just doesn't happen because it happened. Yes. It happened because I believe God wanted him to live.
Yeah. I mean, were you there? And what was the feeling for you?
It was we were just crazy at the minute he was hit.
Did you think he was dead?
I did.
Yeah.
You think the worst. You cannot, it's human. You can't think otherwise. And when he stood up, I thought, oh my gosh. And then they raced us to the cars and we went to the hospital and it was clear very soon that he was going to be okay. But it was a scary time and it changed everything for us. The security became front and center where it hadn't been before, which is not to take away from the Secret Service. It's just that they became on steroids then. And we couldn't do outdoor rallies, which had become sort of the hallmark of the campaign. We couldn't go to buildings that had lots of windows. It really did change the couple of months of the last of the campaign. We adapted, but it seared in my memory, and I think everybody that was there that day.
And did it change him?
I would say, I think he believes that he was saved. I do. And he would never, even if he thought it before, I don't think he would have admitted it. And he will now.
Interesting. So it's brought him maybe to a closer understanding of God?
I think so.
Right.
I think so.
Yeah. Do you ever talk about that with him?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not often, but when to deny that is impossible, then I'll say something about it. But it's our relationships with God are personal.
Yeah.
And I notice he more often says things that are perfunctory. Every president says, "God bless America." Well, it's more profound with him now, and it's more personal. And I do think, you'd have to ask him, but I do think he recognizes that being saved that day was for a reason. For a reason,
mm-hmm. Right. And is that the way you feel? That you're doing something?
I do. I think so much that happened led us to where we are. And Butler was a big part of that. It really was. And for the American public to see a person who was such a fighter as he was that day, I think as awful and tragic as it might have been, it turned out to be something that showed people his character. And that's helpful.
Yeah. And lastly, your philosophy of life, what is it? What's the secret of
right
success?
Now it's survive.
Survive. But success, what advice would you give to people, and what do you see in successful people?
They share, successful people, highly successful people share a couple of sort of mutual characteristics. I don't know somebody who's risen to the top of their profession that doesn't have an unbelievable work ethic. It might not be apparent, it might not be the way I exhibit it or you do, but they are working all the time. People that succeed are good listeners. That old rule about, listen 3 times and act 1 time, right. I believe. And I also think, people are ready for the time. If I had been in this environment in my 30s, I wouldn't be sitting here. Life has a way of steering you if you let it on a good path to get you where you should be when you should get there. And doesn't hurt to work really hard along the way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susie Wiles.
Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the conversation. I'm Miranda Devine. See you next time on Podforce One.